All right. Hey, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, we are back taking a look at the tropics. Tonight is Monday, September 23rd, and we have three active storms in the Atlantic Ocean to talk about, as well as one area of interest for future development. So, looking at all these storms this evening, we do have Tropical Storm Jerry right here near Bermuda. We have Tropical Storm Lorenzo that's just exited Africa and is looking pretty healthy. We have what we're calling Tropical Depression Karen down here south of Puerto Rico, pretty much a complete mess right now. And then we have this area of interest that's popped up near the Yucatan Peninsula, west of the Straits of Florida, that will be moving off generally to the west. So, generally have a few things to talk about. We're going to real quick hit Tropical Storm Jerry and Tropical Storm Lorenzo since they're not expected to be major players for the eastern United States. And then we'll finish talking about Karen, which could be a player down the road for the United States, but it will be some time. So, starting off real quick again with our overall outlook. You can see the storms marked on the Hurricane Center's map, and generally where that storm over the area of interest will be moving to. But we'll start with Tropical Storm Jerry, and this is as of 5 p.m. this afternoon. The storm 65-mile-an-hour wind still is moving west north northwest at 6 miles an hour. The only really impacts we're going to see with Jerry is some tropical storm force conditions to Bermuda. Jerry is basically like Humberto, but only maybe a third of what Humberto was as it passed by. Humberto put 120-mile-an-hour plus winds over Bermuda. Jerry will do nothing like that. The storm this afternoon, the circulation center is still completely exposed on the backside. You can see those low-level clouds circulating back into the only thunderstorm activity, which is all north and east of the center of circulation. The center would probably be right about here. So most of the thunderstorm activity well off to the north, indicating that Jerry is undergoing a very strong southwesterly wind shear, and that's what's basically kept the storm in check over the last couple days, if not weeks, as Jerry has struggled to ever really get itself off the ground ever since it was a Category 2 hurricane very briefly down there near the Caribbean, and has since worked its way up and curving back out to sea. So Jerry will not quite fully make it back out to sea. It's not going to just race away and be completely absorbed like Humberto was. Instead, it looks like higher pressure is going to block it and force it back more to the east. So it'll be lingering for the next week or so, but overall, Jerry not expected to be a threat to the eastern United States. We also had Tropical Storm Lorenzo form yesterday. This storm is a 45-mile-an-hour tropical storm moving west at 16 miles an hour. That westward motion will turn to a more northwest motion going into later this week, as Lorenzo will steadily be strengthening. This storm looks pretty impressive already, if I do say so. We also already have some nice banding features occurring in several different quadrants of the storm. You can see almost all quadrants showing nice transverse banding already. Uh, so this storm will be intensifying. The only thing that's really holding Lorenzo back at this hour is a little bit the circulation is still kind of broad overall, so it's got to tighten that up a little bit. But when it does, Lorenzo should have plenty enough of an environment to strengthen, and the Hurricane Center does expect it to be a hurricane by Wednesday and potentially a major hurricane by the weekend. But Lorenzo may even get ahead of schedule there and could be a major hurricane by Thursday or Friday, I think, as long as this thing keeps up on its tracks. So definitely going to be a nice big storm out there in the Atlantic. But overall, the models do suggest that Lorenzo should recurve back out to sea, well away from the eastern United States and even well away from Bermuda. So, not at this time do we expect Lorenzo to be any sort of significant threat to the eastern United States. Looking finally tonight, we do have Tropical Depression Karen. Karen was a tropical storm yesterday and has now been downgraded back to a tropical depression with 35-mile-an-hour maximum winds. Karen looks about as sad as a tropical system that's classified will look at any point in time. This system is an absolute train wreck. You can see a slight circulation center if you look right about here. You can see some of the low level clouds trying to rotate. It's kind of hard to discern on an infrared satellite since it's now dark. We don't have the visible satellite anymore. But the little bit of thunderstorm activity Karen does have is centered off to the south of the storm. And this whole mess generally is going to move north over the next 24 to 36 hours, where it will impact Puerto Rico. Right now, tropical storm watches remain in effect for Puerto Rico, but I think that any tropical storm conditions they get will mostly be in squalls and gusts, and overall just will be a rainmaker as it passes Puerto Rico. Now, things might change later on and towards late week and into the weekend. What we're looking at is Karen, whatever is left of Karen as it moves north of Puerto Rico, will find a better environment when she gets up here. Right now, she's dealing with heavy amounts of wind shear and some drier air, which has really kept the system ragged and off center. But those conditions will improve for her as she moves north. Looking at the upper level models, this is about 2 days ahead of now. This is in the upper level. So you won't see Karen on this map. You won't see her circulation, but you will see this upper level high pressure that will be dominating the region as Karen moves north. So this is Karen would be about here possibly on Wednesday, about 48 hours from now, and you can see she'll be right up under this upper level anticyclone, which will be limiting the amount of wind shear on the storm, and you also could have a little bit of outflow right here. So there's some suggestion that Karen will find a better environment and lighter wind shear, and that may allow the storm to re-strengthen as long as that center of circulation still sort of remains intact. But again, we'll have to see. Puerto Rico may zap what little bit is left of the storm out of it as she passes. It's just kind of hard to tell with these big sloppy storms. But we do think that Karen will hold on at least in some regard and may regain tropical storm status by Wednesday or Thursday as it moves north. She's trying to move north and follow Jerry out to sea, but that upper level high is going to close off as Jerry moves away. The high that forced Jerry away is going to kind of set up and block Karen from moving any further north, and this is going to force her to stall or drift back off towards the west. It's really going to depend on the exact orientation of the high pressure and exactly how strong Karen is when she gets there. A stronger Karen may be a little more apt to turn more, but a weaker Karen may just kind of wander right about there. You can see Thursday, Friday, Saturday, the storm makes almost no forward progress on the Hurricane Center's 5-day forecast and essentially sits right where it is on the map there. So we'll have to see how that kind of plays out. But Karen might get forced back in some capacity to the west. I don't typically storms that do this typically aren't that strong when they're moving in this direction. They don't really like moving southwest just because of the physics of it all. But we'll have to see how that plays out. But right now, this is still in play for the eastern United States coastline. It's just not going to be anytime soon. We were talking about the middle of next week potentially for any sort of Karen like impacts if they were to even occur. There's a high chance the storm could just sit right here. There's worlds where she could drift, and then a cold front may boot her back out to sea. I mean, there's a whole lot of things that can happen. As you can see, our computer models this afternoon have really no clue. They all suggest that stop and then some turn to the west, but there's also ensembles that see her just kind of dissipate, see her kind of wander off to the right. I mean, there's really no telling at this point what may or may not happen. So all areas along the East Coast, especially around Florida and maybe in the Gulf Coast for a potential crossover, need to be monitoring Karen carefully. But at this point in time, I would not say that Karen is any immediate threat to the eastern United States, nor a significant threat at this time, but does bear at least some respect and some watching over the next few days. So other than that, guys, the only thing we're tracking this evening is this little spot near the Yucatan Peninsula, a 20% chance of development as it does move off towards Mexico, and it does appear that high pressure will keep this thing blocked and mostly away from Texas, where all that rainfall was dumped last week with Imelda. Some areas are still recovering, so good news that their weather should remain fairly dry, all things considered. And looking into the rest of the month, we do see that tropical storm activity or tropical activity around the globe will remain active. We do see another good chance that more storms will form in the northern Pacific and also in the Atlantic main development region. As we move into October, it looks like our upper level things like MJO index and Kelvin waves should still favor some tropical cyclone formation. And we also have to look back towards the Gulf of Mexico as we get into October. Sometimes we'll get like these gyre circulations, these broad low pressures that will form over South America this time of year as higher as pressures rise over the central United States and those more fall cold fronts come in, the pressures rise more. Sometimes we can see these gyres pop up, and then sometimes storms can be coaxed out of there into the Gulf. We saw it with Michael and Nate and storms like that. So they can do that. So the Gulf of Mexico will be kind of our focus of attention as we get into October. But the hurricanes and the Atlantic may stay. That the Atlantic may stay busy well into October this year. So just some things to think about down the road. Don't let your guard down. We are officially in the Lorenzo makes us. Lorenzo is our average 12th storm for the year. 12 storms is our average for the year in the Atlantic in a given season. So anything after Lorenzo is going to be an above average season, which we are no doubt going to see more than Lorenzo as we go on. So that's what I got for you this evening. As always, guys, appreciate you watching and have a good one.